Inquiring minds want to know. And so we are here on another segment of the Workplace Theater. You can find us on YouTube at Workplace Theater. And we'll have some other social media platforms coming this year too. But for sure, this is where we really just talk about things in the workplace that happen that sometimes can and may be theatrical, may not be. But this is a piece of our leadership series. So I'd like to welcome Sarah Glavin on. Sarah, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Man, you only know you a couple years, but gotten a chance to see how you lead in the community, and it's very inspirational. So I appreciate the work that you do to just connect people, connect dots. Tell us a little bit more, though, about who is Sarah Glavin.
Sure. So I came into a leadership role with Amazon about 4 years ago here in Chicago. I previously had been in a corporate social responsibility role, so a community engagement role with United Airlines. Spent 10 years there and came into that work through nonprofit and political fundraising. So my background was always in building networks, whether that was to the benefit of a community organization or to a political candidacy for issues that I thought were important to kind of what was going on in the areas where I lived. And as I learned about that work, I really understood kind of the strength in building a team around you, and whether that's in your immediate workplace or whether that's in the areas that influence your work, of trusted advisors and people who could always be a good, healthy gut check when you were considering a move, whether it's professionally or for a decision you're making in the day-to-day workplace. And so have always kind of been grounded in building community to make decisions and making sure I had, frankly, a room of people smarter than me, giving me guidance and helping kind of coach me through different decision points that I was making professionally. So I've been a resident in Oak Park about 12 years. And always an Illinoisan. I grew up downstate. Went to undergrad in Central Illinois at Illinois Wesleyan University, and moved up to Chicago originally for a job.
Awesome.
So yeah, I have
Awesome.
two beautiful kids who are in the Oak Park schools, and at this very location was a library elected leader for a number of years. So I've gotten to be part of some of the inner workings of this community as well, which has been fun.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Again, this is our leadership series. I'm Chris Thomas, Chief Connector from Grow Exponential, where our big focus is helping teams and organizations build trust within their team so they can work better together. So we appreciate you tuning in. Let's do a little icebreaker.
Sure.
A movie, a book, a podcast, something that has inspired your leadership principles.
Oh, okay. I feel like, there's so many great writers who are writing about relationships and team dynamics. I read a fair amount of Brene Brown. I think that there's a lot of leading with vulnerability that we've been missing in the workplace, and that work. And I think her writing has made me really reflect on where I draw strength and where I look to not only my colleagues but my family for that support system. So I feel like some of that has resonated with me. And then, I also think learning from styles that I don't want to emulate. I won't name names, but I think I've read some works about various leadership styles, especially in the tech spaces, since I'm an Amazon team member, that have influenced, ways that I've seen leadership in a vacuum, or prioritizing maybe speed over relationships and innovation that I don't resonate with, and I think also have influenced me in times where I feel like I need to step back and kind of recalibrate as I'm approaching a project, because that speed and efficiency sometimes is getting in the way of making sure that the table is set correctly and that I'm getting really good ideas to influence my decision making. So I'll leave it there, but I think finding leaders that I think look to surround themselves with different opinions and have a deep bench. I have a very particular leadership style. I think many of us trend to finding people who have similar leadership styles, because like attracts like, but you then have gaps in how you want to serve your team and how you want to build good relationships. So I think that's been a good lesson for me. Yeah.
is the one thing that stuck out. You talked about going fast,
Yeah.
but then almost needing to be like, hey, I gotta slow down a
Yeah.
little bit. I think that's
I have that on my my laptop.
yeah.
Slow down at the top of my computer because I am somebody who's prone to making quick decisions and moving ahead and being kind of a hard charger. But I think that sometimes that doesn't always serve me as well as it could. So I don't want to overanalyze, but at the same time, you also I think sometimes move so quickly that you can you can miss great opportunities because of that. So that's been helpful.
Just taking some notes. Yeah, no, I think that we can move so fast and be tunnel vision
Yeah.
that we forget to see kind of what's around. Definitely guilty of that, and working on it day by day. Yeah, leadership and just being one with people in community.
Yeah.
You know, what do you think is kind of one of the biggest challenges that leaders face in building great teams today?
I think that there are always so many competing priorities that often, the things we're measured on, the metrics that we have that we're responsible for delivering on each quarter are driven by external factors. They might be shareholder responsibilities. They might be about cost cutting, analysis that you're trying to showcase that the work you're doing is having greater impact year over year at a reduced budget, right? These really tactical pieces. And I think sometimes we get so caught up in the things that we're required to measure or that we think can show evidence of our effectiveness that we often don't also incorporate the components in our leadership that really are about things that don't have a true kind of easy to read metric. So the way your employees feel about approaching work, the way people being on teams with you, influences and improves the work product that they're doing. So I think really where I see a lot of conflict and tension is that pouring into people and really creating great environments for people to do work and to feel like they can be part of a solution gets a backseat to kind of those day-to-day KPIs. And so I think that's something that I work on personally. And as I have conversations with team members who are working on projects with me, taking that extra time to make sure that we're setting the table the right way, that we've got all the right voices that need to be represented in solving for something, even if it does mean maybe we don't deliver on the product that quarter. We have to shift timelines because we know at the end of the day, if it is about delivering for a customer, if we don't continually evaluate that and make sure that we're building the right product to serve the right need, that we may get it done on budget or under budget, we may get it done on time, but is it the true output that we know is going to deliver? So I think taking the time to kind of work in those intangibles, and even if your organization doesn't have a way to measure that, like, are there tools you can try to incorporate? One thing I appreciate within my own organization, we have kind of an ongoing 360 review process and a lot of other ways to solicit feedback that aren't calling people out or making people feel like they're under the guise of reporting out on their boss, but in a collaborative way, and really leveraging those tools to give yourself an opportunity to change direction or reflect on the way you've approached something. I also see, for better or for worse, that sometimes time into a role or experience in a role gets priority over maybe new ideas or different lived experiences that can be really influential and important to the decision-making process. So I really this is when you joked about things you're working on. I work a lot on shutting up and being a model for listening in team meetings. I'm a loud voice. I know that about myself. And I have a lot to say. But sometimes if I'm the first person to speak, sometimes even the second or third person to speak, I can suck the air out of the room pretty quickly. And so really making sure you're asking people to contribute, not surprising them with it, but knowing that coming into the meeting, you're going to be looking for them to speak up or that you want them to take lead on a presentation. And that's not everybody's comfort level. I think a lot of leaders come in and feel like they've got to run the meeting or they've got to run the room. And I think that that's been something I really practice on, just being able to sit back and really spend the time making room for other voices at the table. And that's, I think, something that, in different organizations isn't celebrated or recognized as well as it should be. Because if we all had this right, all of us would be as maxed out in our capabilities as leaders, and we're clearly not, right? There's always going to be more to develop and work on. So I think that's something that I see some tension in myself on, but it's something that I think the reflection is worthwhile and gets me to improve as I go through the process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good answer. That's a good.
Good.
So I heard quantitative
Yeah.
versus qualitative in there.
Mm-hmm.
I heard quantity over quality in
Yeah.
there. And then I heard manage the ego.
Yeah.
Manage the ego.
And I think all of us have that, internal struggle, right? We want to show up. We want to do good work. We want to be proud of that work. But sometimes that can extinguish the enthusiasm of other people who are really capable and people who express their leadership differently. Because not everybody shows up as a type A hard charger when they bring their best.
So basically learn how to balance, y'all. Learn how to balance.
Yeah. That's a good summary.
Yeah.
I should have said it that way.
So when you look at kind of all of these things that are going on, right? We're dealing with politics. People are dealing with personal stuff. How do you keep your team engaged? How's that? Keep it simple.
Well, I think that right now, and, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't think about the environment that everyone's in. I think people are dealing with a lot of fast-paced things coming at us, whether that's social media, whether that's what you're reading in the newspaper in the morning, whether it's something going on in your own personal life that could influence or affect the way you show up at work. And you have to let people be human and give people some space. So I do think, being reasonable about giving people room when they need to reset expectations or evaluate deadlines. We all have responsibilities and we've got goals we've got to get through the year, but being nimble and being someone who can redevelop and kind of reorder priorities, I think is an important aspect that all of us should bring to the workplace, whether you're the boss or you're a team member, because level setting on that expectation is something that's a good life skill anyway, being able to tell somebody when you need more space or when you need more time. And as a boss, being a person who can respect that and understand people have things going on. But I also think process-wise, I have a really difficult time, I think, because my job has a mix of external facing responsibility and internal responsibilities, that sometimes you feel like you've got to be on the external piece and kind of the firefighting side of the work all the time, but then you're going to blow deadlines and you're not going to get internal responsibilities done that other people are looking to inform their work. So both, I think your comment earlier about balance is important, but I think also it's about structuring my day in a way that I feel like helps me ensure that I'm getting some of those maybe less sexy internal responsibilities done in a consistent manner. So I really try to segment my work day so I'm not external facing all day long. I'm not only out in community meetings, but I'm making time in my schedule where, all devices are off. It's focus time, in a quiet place. I'm not a social person when I do that kind of work. I'm not somebody who's watching TV in the background or listening to music. I'm kind of a quiet library user when it comes to that focus work. But really thinking about your time management. And I think that's hard when so much is coming at you all the time. And the speed of employer relationships has changed. We're now, I think, in a lot of industries coming back into an office environment where people are at a 9-to-5 job. But we've really blurred with COVID and work from home and other things the lines of the workday. And you have to maintain some structure and organization and give your team room to maintain some structure and organization and have boundaries. So I'm a big believer in, having an email signature that tells people to respond when it's convenient for them, even if the time you're communicating it may not be when their normal workday hours are happening. We also work in global marketplaces. So I used to joke, I'd get on a phone call and I'd say good morning. And I could be talking to people in 16 time zones.
Right.
So it's not morning to them.
Yeah.
But you get kind of used to your working structure, your day, and you don't always think about kind of those considerations. So I think, one, making sure you've got a plan so that you are taking time, and you do have focus time, you have reflective time, you have external facing time, and it's balanced in a way that you're getting all of those parts of the work done. But also I think it is that respecting boundaries and establishing boundaries, whether you're a team member. Now, I know I hear all kinds of jokes about younger employees. I'm in my 40s, don't have the same work expectations, but I think a lot of that has to do with not being clear and not being an effective communicator, both bottom up and top down, right? That yes, you may have some responsibilities that have to get done in a certain way, but as a leader, you should be communicating those to your team, and that should not surprise anyone. It's like annual reviews, right? If you know you've got a C on your report card, you should know that all year. Nobody should be surprised in December that they didn't meet the mark. So I do think establishing some of those communications structures with your leadership, both as a team member and as a boss, is really central to that. And being honest about those check-ins and where you need those flexible times in your schedule and how you can or cannot adhere to maybe some structured rigor for internal processes, reporting, some of those things that nobody loves to do, but we know we have to do to prove that we're doing our job day to day.
Yeah. Do you agree with having people come back into the office more often, or?
This is a hot button.
Yeah.
So I'm in an organization that has gone return to work 5 days a week, but I am a remote employee based on my job function. So I do always think that there is going to be a balance. I do know people who I think really like being back in an office environment. I lived in that kind of very structured 8 to 5 world for a long time in my career. I find that if you're, collaborating in a job, I do think there is passive learning that happens. I truly think that for some of my earlier career team members and people who are just getting to understand an industry, even if they're not earlier in their career, but a job changer, there is some benefit to being in a collaborative space and being able to pull someone into a meeting or ask someone to go to lunch that might not work in a similar work group to you. I think there is utility in that, but I think there's a lot of room in between. So I do think there are going to be a fair number of employees who bristle at a return to work environment, even if it's a couple days a week, and really do want the autonomy of being able to have more flexibility, whether it's for childcare or whether it's for caring for a parent or their own transportation needs. I also very much respect that I have some colleagues who say they didn't feel supported in an 8 to 5 work environment. And they do find that they've got a different support network in a remote environment. So I think it's going to be, a balance for different industries. I don't think there's sadly a one size fits all answer. But I think for me, I like a little bit of both. I tend to find that even though I'm not required to be in the office, I spend a couple of days a week in the office, if for nothing else, just to make time to catch up with teams that I don't normally interact with on the road. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What principle, if you could just pick one, is one that's kind of guided you in the different leadership roles that you've taken?
Yeah, I'd say the strongest for me is being a continual learner. This is such a changing job market, and I didn't know my job was a job when I was a high school student or a college kid. That representing a business interest out in community and being someone who could solve problems with a company's assets out in community. I didn't know anybody who ever done that for a living. There's still not all that many people I know who do what I do professionally, but I had a willingness in early jobs that when something was presented to me as an opportunity, even if I felt like it was outside of my comfort level or outside of my scope, that I would learn about it and try to say yes. Sometimes I learned about it and realized it wasn't something I wanted to do. But I think especially with incorporation of artificial intelligence, what we're seeing changing in technology, the jobs that young people are getting trained for today, we don't even know what those jobs are going to look like 10 years from now. So having kind of that internal interest to keep learning and challenging yourself to be in spaces that aren't your normal business day spaces, I think really influence my ability as a leader to adapt and to find my skills continue to be relevant. I think if you're somebody who wants to, have a very like head down job in a spreadsheet, unfortunately, I think that there are going to be fewer and fewer of those opportunities that don't also rely on someone's ability to build relationships or someone's ability to deliver different value than just doing kind of repetitive process-driven work. So I'd say that, I continue to lean into that and to read things that I don't know anything about and spend time with people who are in industries that I'm not familiar with. I still don't know that I'm an expert in like AI or quantum or any of these fields, but having the curiosity and the interest to put yourself into those conversations and challenge kind of how you would approach that work if you were given the opportunity, I think has served me well and is something that I would encourage other people to think about. Just the changing world of work and knowing that if you kind of put your head down, unfortunately, you're going to miss opportunities and kind of be left behind, I think, in spaces that you could deliver value in if you were willing to kind of broaden your aperture.
I was talking with the kids earlier, and value and discipline were the two things.
Yeah.
And I kind of told them through my stories of the workforce and how the things that I really wanted, I didn't get paid right away doing those. Like I went in and I said, this really means a lot to me. I'm going to go in, I'm going to do it. And then those turned into job opportunities or projects or things. So
yeah, that's absolutely true. And I think as I talk to a lot of the students that I work with, they have kind of rough ideas about things that motivate them or that interest them. But those core things, those kind of foundational components do come to you by showing up and taking that opportunity and figuring out if you like that kind of work or if you like that, kind of process in your day. And if you don't take those opportunities, then you'll never know. And I think I definitely see that in media and entertainment, creative arts spaces. There are only so many people that you're going to have a personal connection to who have careers in these fields. So if you don't try it and say yes and challenge yourself, then you might not open yourself up to a lot of things that you could otherwise be really successful at if you gave it a shot. So I agree. I think that that's spot on for the kids.
for sure.
Yeah.
So I mentioned earlier kind of the political shift that we're going through. Life itself is just shifting in 2025 post what COVID was. Is there one kind of leadership principle out there that you feel like leaders need to focus on more or make a shift in?
I do. I think that, it feels right now, I think, like there's a whole lot coming at everybody, regardless of, I think, your political leanings and where you feel like maybe your professional trajectory is. It almost feels like information overload, I think, for a lot of people. And so, as I talk to leaders of teams, as I talk to people that I work with, I think like a steady pace and really like building a plan and working that plan. I think, there is, I think, inherent in a lot of people this perspective that, I have to prove my value by kind of moving faster and responding more quickly to texts and emails to kind of upping my pace. And I think rather than kind of responding to the temperature and the pace that we're seeing, whether it's via media channels or other things, that's burning people out. And that, kind of drive to deliver more than you delivered yesterday isn't necessarily creating better or more effective. It's just speed and not necessarily always to the end game of a good outcome or a good product or a good relationship or a good service. And so I think that as I'm talking to folks who are evaluating how they're spending their time, there is this kind of, back to my original comment, this mentality of like slowing down and really refining why you're doing what you're doing, coming back to the why, whether that's about creating the space you want to create for your team, whether that's about a service you're developing for a customer, a product you're developing, that rather than chase in a million different directions and produce, it's coming back to that core value set and really every day checking in against it. And, whether you do that at the beginning of your day, whether you do that at the end of your day, whether that's an end of the week process for you, that when you see the things that are getting in your way, the things that are creating noise, to stop doing the things that aren't serving you.
And I think that's hard as someone who has, I think, always been on this like more trajectory professionally, to say like, at a point, I'm not going to deliver the best. I'm not going to support the community the way that I know that I can, or bring programs to the market that I think can be effective if I just keep spinning.
Churning. Yeah.
So it's, refining focus, collaborating differently, bringing different stakeholders that I know also have commonality in some of the things they want to accomplish together, building teams differently. But I think all of that kind of to the same purpose, which is staying true on focus, really narrowing scope, and making sure you're delivering against the why. And it's like, and to your point about things earlier, it's like listening, right? It's something you have to actively practice, and something that I think sometimes we feel almost feels like administrative, like we don't need to navigate that. But unless you go through that, unless if you're a to-do list worker, if you're somebody who likes Gantt charts, like everybody's got their different style. But I think actively working that process is something that I think we're going to continue to need in the next years and beyond. Otherwise, I think we're going to expel a tremendous amount of energy, and we're going to lose really talented people because they feel like they either can't maintain this pace, or they're not maintaining the pace to an end that makes them feel satisfied and proud of the work. They're just kind of doing it because it's what they've been vested to do, right? So I do think, like, if we want to keep people satisfied in spaces, let people feel like they're progressing and seeing value in what they deliver every day, kind of practicing that process is something I think is really important. And I think something I check in with people on to say, like, once you got to the end of the week this week, like, do you feel like there's some things that you really wanted to drive home that you got done? And did they land the way you thought they'd land? Why didn't they, right? What can you do next week that helps you feel like you can think about it again differently? And are you moving kind of in that trajectory, or is it just you're getting overwhelmed by the noise? And if that's happening, then also as a leader, what can I do to reduce that for you? Like, are there people who are throwing processes at you that simply we could automate, or we could handle in a different structure? And as a leader, how do I get stuff out of your way that's not helping you serve that why? So I think that's something that's going to continue to be a priority for me.
I don't know if this was for you all or for me, but it's sitting in with me here. No, that's great. That's great advice. I think more people need to hear that, because a lot of people are trying to like hit a target or get to a thing versus like, okay, and not most people, myself included, how can I slow down, look at all this, breathe? My business partners told me that yesterday. I'm like, well, what do you mean? You want me to breathe? I just gave you time to ask questions. Like, what else do you think? So I have to find myself doing that. Great.
Because we need you.
Yeah.
And we need you doing the work, or we'll lose out on opportunities if you're not doing the work, right?
Yeah. So what, anything that you want to leave any leaders out there with, any people that are in a work environment that may be struggling with a leader or as a leader?
Yeah.
Just any final words?
Yeah, I'd say, I've gotten to know Chris through working in community programs that are ancillary to his day job. They're part of my day job, but I think, you're going to have a lot of wonderful people you interact with professionally, a lot of people that you meet, through various relationships. And I think taking time to pour into those relationships, I've found over my career, and I've been in a lot of different jobs since I got out of college. And one thing I think that resonates is it's often about the people who you're fortunate enough to have met through a professional relationship, but then how do you learn from them, with them, about ways that you want to refine the way you approach your day-to-day job, your leadership skill set. And it's not always the people you expect who I think can provide you with some of the mentorship components that really help you deliver over time as a leader. I've found folks that met somebody at the gym whose motivation around the way they approach their workout has influenced the way they work at their job. I've met people who that's come through a faith leader that wasn't about a day-to-day influence in their work environment. And so I think not only looking for leadership guidance from like your traditional employment channels, but the people that you find yourself in community with, the people you find yourself in PTA meetings with, whatever that context may be, that the leadership influences that sometimes really deliver for you professionally aren't coming from the places you naturally think you'd find them. And so valuing those relationships and spending time in those spaces that you know can give you different perspective. So that's what I'd say. Look for the unexpected, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised sometimes in the leadership lessons you'll come from it.
I love it.
Yeah.
Value people too.
Yeah.
Value people. That's it.